It's July 11th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the NATO summit in Lithuania this week. President Yoon has arrived in the northeastern European country. A series of bilateral summits are scheduled, and talks on tightening global cooperation on North Korea issues will be among the top agenda items. And on the eve of the annual summit, Türkiye agrees to back Sweden's bid to join NATO after months of blocking the country's application over a multitude of concerns like hosting Kurdish militants. The North Korean leader's sister Kim Yo-jong has sent yet another warning that the U.S. military will face a very risky flight in the event of another illegal intrusion into its airspace. Washington urged the regime to stop escalatory actions. President Yoon has touched down in the host city of this year's NATO summit. Ahead of the two-day security meeting, the president is showing Seoul's solidarity in supporting Ukraine and looking to strengthen international pressure against North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Our Oh Soo-young reports as she travels with the president.
South Korea will upgrade its relations with the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance across 11 strategic areas as President Yoon attends the two-day security summit in the Lithuanian capital. Yoon arrived in Vilnius on Monday, a day ahead of the summit, marking a second time attending the annual meeting, having become the first South Korean leader to participate last year. South Korea subsequently established a permanent mission to the 31-member alliance. At the Vilnius meeting, Seoul will look to adopt an individually tailored partnership programme with NATO, elevating the bilateral cooperation arrangement they've had for the past 11 years to focus on 11 areas, including cybersecurity, non-proliferation and emerging technologies. The document will be adopted at a meeting between Yoon and NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg on Tuesday, according to a senior presidential official, who added that discussions would also cover ways to expand information sharing among NATO allies, including the United States. This comes as Yoon looks to promote greater Pacific Atlantic cooperation, with support and restoration efforts for Ukraine high on NATO's agenda, along with growing geopolitical and nuclear tensions across the globe. On that note, President Yoon will moderate a meeting with his counterparts from Japan, Australia and New Zealand on Wednesday, convening as NATO's 4 Asian-Pacific partners across the globe.
In addition to establishing a mutual partnership for a norm-based international order, the president will discuss with member states and partner countries how to respond to North Korea's nuclear missiles and emphasize the international community's resolute and united cooperation against North Korea's illegal activities.
In that regard, the South Korean leader has said there will be several opportunities for him to engage with President Joe Biden and touch on topics such as Washington's security commitment and the expansion of trilateral security cooperation with Japan. There's a chance that the two leaders could meet at a banquet event for NATO's partners on Tuesday evening. A separate meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is being arranged, with the agenda likely to include North Korea and Tokyo's plan to release Fukushima's wastewater into the ocean, which has been a bilateral sticking point. But first, Yoon will meet around 6 US lawmakers on Tuesday, including Pete Ricketts, and presumably discuss issues related to security and bilateral ties, according to a senior presidential official. The official added that Yoon will also sit down for bilaterals with leaders of various nations, including the Netherlands and Norway, as he spotlights supply chain security and Korea's bid to host the 2030 World Expo in the coastal city of Busan. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Vilnius.
And just in time for the summit, Türkiye has agreed to ratify Sweden's bid to join NATO after over a year of refusing to back the country's application to join the military alliance. Lee Seung-ja has more.
According to NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg on Monday, Türkiye has agreed to back Sweden's bid to join the NATO military alliance.
I have just had a constructive meeting with President Erdogan and Prime Minister Kristersson. I'm glad to announce that as a result, President Erdogan has agreed to forward the accession protocol for Sweden to the Grand National Assembly as soon as possible, and work closely with the Assembly to ensure ratification.
The announcement came after Stoltenberg held talks with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson in Lithuania. The decision on Sweden's NATO bid comes despite Erdogan insisting on Monday that Sweden should be considered for the military alliance after Turkey joins the European Union. Despite the support from Turkey, Stoltenberg said this does not mean Sweden will immediately become the next member of the alliance and refrained from giving a specific timeline for membership.
I will not give you exact dates for that, but this is a clear commitment, and the President has made it clear that it will happen as soon as possible.
Ultimately, Erdogan's decision marked a significant U-turn from a previous firm stance against Sweden's attempts to join. Turkey had mainly opposed Sweden's NATO membership due to claims that the Nordic nation allows members of recognized Kurdish terror groups to operate in the country, most notably the militant Kurdistan Workers' Party. It also recently accused Sweden of allowing Islamophobic demonstrations, such as the burning of the Quran. Despite this, the NATO chief said the two sides had worked closely together to address Turkey's legitimate security concerns, leading to the breakthrough. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Just hours after a warning over allegations that a U.S. spy plane entered North Korea's airspace, North Korean leader Sister Kim Yo-jong has sent yet another warning this morning that the U.S. military will face severe consequences if it enters the regime's exclusive economic zone. Song Yu-jin reports.
For the second straight day, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong has threatened that there will be consequences for the U.S. sending spy planes over Pyongyang's exclusive economic zone. In a statement carried by the North state-run Korean Central News Agency on Tuesday, Kim claimed that a U.S. spy plane entered the regime's EEZ 8 times on Monday. She added that if the U.S. continues such actions, its military will experience, quote, a very risky flight. This comes after Kim alleged Monday evening that the North's warplanes repelled a U.S. spy plane that flew over its EEZ, calling it a grave violation of the regime's sovereignty and security. Earlier in the day, the North's defense ministry released a statement which seemed to imply that the spy planes intruded into the regime's territorial airspace, saying that the planes flew into its inviolable airspace. Territorial airspace extends 12 nautical miles from the coast, whereas the EEZ extends 200 miles and is not considered a country's airspace under international law. In response, the U.S. State Department urged Pyongyang to refrain from escalating tensions and reiterated that Washington is open to dialogue. When talking about Kim's remarks, Pentagon Deputy Spokesperson Sabrina Singh said that Washington remains committed to safely and responsibly flying, sailing, and operating anywhere that international law allows. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff also responded.
U.S. air surveillance assets conduct routine reconnaissance flights around the Korean peninsula, and North Korea's claim of airspace violation is not true. We strongly urge the North to immediately stop creating tension with these false claims.
Experts say such actions could be a way for the North to justify its future provocations, which could take place sometime before or after a major military parade planned for July 27th, known as Victory Day in the regime. Another possible reason could be the first nuclear consultative group meeting between South Korea and the U.S. that'll take place in Seoul next Tuesday. The group, which was launched during President Yoon Suk-yeol's state visit to the U.S. in April, will discuss information sharing, consultation mechanisms, joint planning, and execution to increase nuclear deterrence against North Korea. Song Yu-jin, Arirang News.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says she has made it clear to Beijing that Washington will not back down from protecting U.S. national security. Speaking to the Marketplace podcast on Monday, Yellen pointed out that China has also semiconductor export controls just like the U.S., noting that both countries implement measures in the interest of national security. When asked about China's response to Washington's national security first policy, she said Beijing was concerned that it could turn into an economic competition. Yellen noted that her recent Beijing visit was constructive, as she was also able to explain that export controls are intended to diversify supply chains, not to gain unfair economic advantage. In order to denuclearize North Korea, the international community needs to show its will to denuclearize the North is stronger than the regime's nuclear and missile ambitions. President Yoon said this before heading to Lithuania, where the NATO summit is taking place. For more on this, we're joined by Professor Kim Jae-chun. Good morning.
Good morning to you too.
What did President Yoon mean by the will of global society to denuclearize the North must be stronger than the North's pursuit of nuclear missile development? I mean, and also what will NATO member states and attending leaders, including Yoon, discuss in terms of North Korea?
Well, one advantage that North Korean regime has over, say, other democratic countries is that their leaders seldom change. Think about it. There has been only 3 leaders in North Korea. 3 Kims: Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un. They were all very much obsessed with nuclear weapons, not taking good care of their own people. In democracies, this cannot happen because if your leaders starve your own people to death, those leaders will be unseated in coming elections. So at least in terms of pursuing nuclearization relentlessly, North Korea's political system has an advantage. Sure, international community wants North Korea to denuclearize. South Korea wants North Korea to denuclearize, but new presidents come to office every 5 years, and then different presidents have different policies to North Korea. Some presidents put a lot of pressure to steer North Korea to the path of denuclearization, but there's some other presidents had been quite lenient on North Korea. So what President Yoon emphasized was that we have to be consistent. We have to be consistent that North Korea's denuclearization is the first order of importance. So during this NATO summit, many agendas will be on the discussion table. But I think North Korea, the importance of North Korea, the denuclearization will be on the discussion table as well. Leaders will announce that they will not give up on North Korea's denuclearization.
Right. President Yoon has been emphasizing the consistency in his policies in dealing with North Korea issues. And I'm sure he will ask for a stronger global solidarity in putting that pressure on North Korea to stop it from developing even stronger nuclear and missile development. Now, also on the sidelines of the NATO summit, President Yoon and the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, we all know they are sitting down to discuss the Fukushima wastewater release, right? And Kishida is expected to ask for Seoul's understanding, and the South Korean government has shown respect to the IAEA report, right? Now, can we expect any surprises from the meetup?
I don't really expect any surprises from the summit. For one thing, the summit is going to be very brief because aside from the summit with Prime Minister Kishida, President Yoon will be having at least, as far as I know, 5 more summits with other leaders. So you are looking at a very busy schedule here. On top of that, two leaders have met several times in past 5 months. I heard it was Japan that insisted that the summit with Yoon. Japan wants to address Fukushima issue, release of waters and resumption of exporting fisheries. As you said, Prime Minister Kishida would say once again that, well, the release of nuclear waters is safe, so is Fukushima fisheries. I think President Yoon will emphasize that the most important thing for South Korea is South Korean people's health. That's the most important thing. So he might ask for instituting an ad hoc inspection team between South Korea and Japan, with which 2 countries can monitor safety of released waters and Fukushima fisheries on regular basis. This could allay the anxiety of South Korean people. Despite the IAEA report that the waters and fisheries are safe, still nearly 80% of South Koreans feel anxious about the situation. And I think government in 2 countries have to do more to allay the fears of South Korean people.
Right. We all expect the Yoon-Kishida talks to be very brief and short, considering they are pretty occupied. But I guess the fact that their meetup carries more symbolic meaning, considering the fact that the Fukushima wastewater release is pretty imminent as soon as next month.
Exactly.
And President Yoon will also visit Poland before he comes back to Korea. There'll be a summit with the Polish president to mark their 10th anniversary of the strategic partnership this year, right? What do you think topped those bilateral talks this time?
I think two leaders will talk about how South Korea and Poland can work together to help Ukraine and Ukrainians. Mm-hmm. It is reported that South Korea and Poland will take very active participation in Ukraine's restoration, rebuilding of Ukraine's after the war, because the war will end eventually. South Korea is very good at civil military operations. These civil military operations to build war-torn societies. And President Yoon already pledged that South Korea will contribute greatly to rebuilding of Ukraine. Poland is adjacent to Ukraine, so Poland was very much adversely affected by this war. Poland is very much interested in rebuilding of Ukraine as well. So rebuilding of Ukraine is something two leaders can discuss. And along that line of discussion, two leaders can talk more about the ways in which two countries can deepen defense cooperation. Poland always had great security concerns, but now after the war, they are all the more concerned of their security. So Poland is buying South Korean K9 artillery and other weapons from South Korea. So deepening this defense cooperation and working on other defense contracts is going to be another important agenda that's going to be on the table.
Sure, South Korea and Poland are clearly codependent at this time of the year or era, I have to say. All right, Professor Kim Jae-chan, thank you so much for your insight this morning.
Thank you.
South Korea is ready to share its advanced rice production technology through the K-Ricebelt project. Our Lee Soo-jin went to find out how the project will allow African nations to reach rice self-sufficiency.
South Korea is accelerating efforts to expand its K-Ricebelt project. The nation signed MOUs on Monday with 8 African countries to establish rice cultivation facilities and provide the necessary infrastructure to meet growing demand on the continent. The K-Ricebelt project seeks to produce 10,000 tons of rice seeds each year starting in 2027 in the 8 African nations. That's expected to supply enough rice for around 30 million people. The participating countries are Ghana, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Gambia, Senegal, Cameroon, Uganda, and Kenya. But other nations are also welcome to participate, as South Korea is ready to share its experience of going from an aid recipient to an aid donor with more countries.
We would like to see all 23 countries in Africa that we're currently working with participate in the program, as we want to contribute to helping Africa overcome its food crisis based on our own experiences.
The project is especially meaningful because the K-Ricebelt project contributes to South Korea's sustainable development goals.
We're trying to solve famine in Africa. As such, this is ultimately contributing to sustainable agriculture as well as the UN SDGs.
Rice consumption in sub-Saharan Africa has been increasing by 6% each year. But because most African countries have not yet achieved rice self-sufficiency, regional output covers only 60% of the demand, making them more vulnerable to food insecurity. We sat down with the Republic of Guinea's Minister of Agriculture and Livestock to ask him what the K-Ricebelt project means to his country.
Thanks to the relationship with South Korea, which can allow us to increase rice productivity so that we can move from 1.5 ton per hectare to at least 5 to 6 ton per hectare.
He's also not too concerned about the challenges that may arise because of the way the K-Ricebelt has been designed.
Not just a financing support, it's also a technical support. It's also a technological transfer project.
He said that's why he believes that this will have a huge impact on Guinea. He added that he, along with the other ministers, will be visiting Korea's rice production and farming equipment facilities during their visit. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Russia, where the Kremlin says that President Vladimir Putin met with mercenary Wagner Group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin 5 days after Prigozhin's failed mutiny in June. Now, according to Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, 35 of the group's commanders, including Prigozhin, were invited to a 3-hour meeting with Putin in Moscow. There, the Russian leader gave an assessment of the Wagner Group's Ukraine war effort and the mutiny, and suggested ways the group could be used for future combat. Prigozhin also reportedly told Putin that the mercenary group supports the president unconditionally. Currently, Prigozhin's whereabouts are unknown. He was offered a move to Belarus and for charges against him to be dropped in exchange for ending the mutiny. Now, in Europe, nearly 62,000 people died last summer from heat-related deaths. The numbers were published in the science journal Nature Medicine on Monday. The deaths were recorded between May 30th and September 4th, 2022, during what was the continent's hottest summer on record. The country hardest hit was Italy, with 18,000 fatalities, followed by Spain with 11,000 deaths and Germany with 8,000 deaths. The study also found that the heat-related mortality rate was 63% higher in women than men, and those aged over 65 were more likely to die from the heat. The death toll comes amid increasing European temperatures that have risen almost twice as fast as the global average. Now, residents in South Africa's eastern city of Johannesburg woke up to surprise snow on Monday. It was the first time snow fell in the country's largest city since 2012 and came on the back of extremely cold and wet conditions, still ongoing throughout most of the country. According to the South African Weather Service, Johannesburg recorded its coldest day of the year on the same day at -3 degrees Celsius. While certain mountainous parts of South Africa do see occasional snowfall, it's a sight rarely seen in the country's major cities. Although the snow caused no major issues for the region, the Weather Service has issued a warning for potential disruptive snowfall in the southeast KwaZulu-Natal province, including icy roads and traffic disruptions. And finally, the Netherlands has officially handed back hundreds of cultural artifacts it took from Indonesia during colonial times. They were returned during a ceremony on Monday at the Museum Volkenkunde in Leiden. The items range from 13th century temple carvings to jewelry and small statues. The return follows an announcement by the Dutch government to return looted items from both Indonesia as well as Sri Lanka. It is also considering returning some artifacts to Nigeria. Other European nations have also made plans to return items taken during their colonial periods. In January, a museum in Berlin announced plans to return hundreds of human skulls to former East African colonies. And Belgium last year returned a gold-capped tooth that belonged to Congolese independence hero Patrice Lumumba.
Good morning. It's Chobok today, the beginning of the most sizzling days of the year in Korea. We need to brace for sweltering heat day and night for about a month from now on. But as the monsoon season is in full swing, we'll have to worry more about rain than heat today. Wet clouds are dropping rain on the west coast, south coast, and Jeju this morning. And until tomorrow, Chungcheongdo and Jeollado provinces will see up to 150 millimeters. Central regions could receive more than 120 millimeters. And such conditions could pose a landslide threat. Now, along with showers, heat relief is expected, but heat advisories remain in place. Jeju saw a record high of 37.3 degrees yesterday, the fourth highest since 1923. But there will be heat relief on Jeju at 33, Seoul and Daejeon topping out at 27 degrees Celsius. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. Stay safe wherever you are.